Lords, I rise to move amendments 244A-B and 244C-A as probing amendments. Lord Lowe and Lord Walton had hoped to be here, but they both have prior engagements elsewhere. They were not expecting to be speaking on this bill at this time of the evening, but they both asked me to impress upon the House their very strong support for these two amendments. The problem of legal highs, many of them produced in China and available on the web, is growing rapidly. The government understandably wants to find an appropriate response to a variety of substances involving very different levels of risk. Understandable too is the idea of temporary banning orders while information about the substances is gathered and analysed, albeit that a full evaluation of these substances will probably take about 5 years. I'm not entirely sure what the noble lady, the Minister, will do at the end of the 1-year period. The only question I hope we can address today, and it is a serious question, is whether the noble lady, the Minister, will consider opening up the possibility, not making any commitment, but opening up the possibility of controlling the supply of some of these substances through alternative regulatory mechanisms rather than all of them being controlled through the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971. In putting this question, I want to applaud James Brockenshire, Minister for Drugs Policy in the other place, for making clear that the temporary bans will only apply to the supply, sale and distribution of these substances and not to users, thus avoiding the criminalisation of users during the period of the temporary bans. My concern is that at the end of the banning period, many of the substances will in fact, I guess, become permanently banned, and as the bill stands, the substances would all fall within the ambit of the Misuse of Drugs Act. In seeking to find appropriate controls of legal highs, the government has a wonderful opportunity to explore different methods of control and to evaluate those different methods. It's in the spirit of wishing to work with the government to find the best way forward that I've tabled these two amendments. Why do I regard the opportunity to evaluate alternative methods of control as so important? There is increasing evidence from across the world that a health-oriented approach to drug use is more effective than criminalisation in reducing levels of addiction, and surely that is our common goal. The Global Commission on Drug Policy concluded that criminalising drug users has failed to reduce problem drug use. They recommend rather precisely the approach of our two amendments: to encourage experimentation with alternative methods of control of less harmful drugs, evaluation and the introduction of evidence-based treatment. I know the noble lady would wish to take seriously the recommendations of Global Commission members, Kofi Annan among them, former Secretary General of the United Nations, of course, who was ultimately responsible for overseeing the implementation of the UN Drugs Conventions. Paul Volcker, former Chairman of the Federal Reserve, George Shultz, former US Secretary of State, all highly regarded world figures, not to mention the raft of ex-presidents of countries in Europe and Latin America. I think the views of all these people, I'm sure the views of all of these people, the noble lady the Minister will want to take most seriously. Globally, the use of drugs continues to rise at an alarming rate. Opiates by 34.5%, cocaine 27%, cannabis 8.5% in the 10 years to 2008. In the UK, as we have focused more upon the treatment of users, and as the police increasingly, though not uniformly, turn a blind eye to cannabis use, we've seen a flattening out of some drug use statistics. Any switch from criminalising to evidence-based health policies seems to be helpful, and I know the government plans to increase access to drug treatments. Our aim today is to ensure that the policy for legal highs discourages problem drug use, rather than driving people into the hands of unscrupulous drug traffickers and onto the most dangerous and contaminated substances. What are the consequences likely to be of a ban on legal highs? We can look at the impact of the ban on mephedrone, for example. Did it reduce the use of mephedrone? Apparently not. In the latest MixMag annual survey, a higher proportion, 61% of respondents, had used mephedrone in the year following the ban than the 42% in the year before. 3/4 of those who'd ever tried mephedrone had apparently done so since it was banned in April 2010. Some had decided to use ecstasy instead, and 19% said they'd use more cocaine as a result of the ban. I don't necessarily understand all of this, but I do think this information is relevant to our debate today. Regulation of such a market is certainly very far from straightforward. Whatever the policy, young people need to know the risks associated with these highs. Will the noble lady and the minister agree to fund an information campaign on legal highs and evaluate it as one element of the evidence base for future policy making? A warning signal comes from the Demos UK DPC study, which points out that banning substances without clear evidence of harm could forestall the research and development of useful medicines. Also, they point out that, of course, bans can result in people turning to more harmful substances. Perhaps the noble lady and the minister could comment upon these concerns. In the Netherlands and Finland, legal highs are being controlled through medicines legislation. Austria has also used medicines legislation to restrict the sale of spice without criminalising users. There's little analysis yet about the effectiveness of this approach. Has the government explored the possibility of using medicines legislation in this country and then evaluating it ourselves? New Zealand have tried both regulation and prohibition of BZP, a legal high. The New Zealand Law Commission reviewed the alternative methods of control and favoured regulation over prohibition. I would welcome the noble lady and the minister's response to the New Zealand Commission's conclusions. The APPG on drug policy reform, which I chair, is planning to undertake an inquiry into alternative forms of controls for legal highs. We hope to report in 6 to 9 months, and what I would wish for is that we could work with the government to find the best solution to a very difficult problem. But in order to do that, we just need the door to be kept a little ajar in clause 152. I beg to move.
Amendment proposed, page 102, line 7, at beginning insert Intoxicating Substances Supply Act 1985, enactments on trading standards and.
My Lords, I've got my name to this amendment, and it certainly, I would wish to pay tribute to the noble Lady Baroness Meacher for her very energetic work in this area. She's given us an excellent introduction to this amendment, so I won't delay things at all, except to say that since 1971, when we've had the Misuse of Drugs Act, we've tried almost everything in the book, one government or another, society as a whole. We haven't got anywhere with it, really. The so-called war on drugs is at best a stalemate, and at worst we're losing the battles. It does seem a good moment to try a different approach, and in particular, one of the things that's changed is since the early 1970s, when we didn't have the internet, people couldn't just order things over the internet and get them by post. Actually, what the public are looking for now is consumer protection, whether it's for aspirins or legal highs. So I can understand that we all, from wherever political point we come from, have to approach this question with great sensitivity. It's not an easy one. But I'm very grateful to the noble Baroness for raising the amendment in this way that she has, and I think it gives us a great opportunity.